The manila envelope slipped from my trembling hands, spilling fake medical documents across the marble floor of what I'd believed was Seattle General Hospital's oncology wing. Around me, the pristine hallway buzzed with activity that now seemed theatrical rather than medical. Actors in white coats hurrying past, fake patients in wheelchairs, elaborate props designed to convince a desperate father that his daughter was dying of terminal cancer. But there was no cancer, no terminal diagnosis, no life-saving treatment that required $200,000 of my retirement savings. Just my daughter Emma standing in a supply closet wearing a hospital gown, counting stacks of cash with the same methodical precision she'd once used for her college math homework. The woman I'd raised, sacrificed for, and loved unconditionally had spent 6 months convincing me she was dying, all to fund a gambling addiction that had already destroyed her life and was now destroying mine. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The first lie began exactly 187 days ago when Emma burst through my front door at 6:47 p.m., her face streaked with tears and her usual composure completely shattered. "Dad, I need to tell you something, and you're going to want to sit down." I was already seated at my kitchen table, reviewing property tax documents for the small apartment complex I'd built from nothing over 30 years of construction work. At 63, I should have been planning fishing trips and grandchildren visits, not worrying about my 28-year-old daughter's latest crisis. Emma had always been dramatic, prone to emotional outbursts that required paternal intervention and usually financial assistance. But something in her voice that evening carried a gravity I'd never heard before. "I went to the doctor last week for those headaches I've been having," she began, settling into the chair across from me with the deliberate movements of someone delivering rehearsed news. "The initial test showed some abnormalities, so they ran more comprehensive scans. Dad, they found something." Her voice cracked on the word something, and fresh tears began streaming down her face. The performance was flawless, hitting every emotional note that would devastate a loving father. "What kind of something, sweetheart?" My throat felt suddenly dry, and the property tax forms seemed to fade into insignificance. "It's a brain tumor. Stage 3, glioblastoma multiforme." The medical terminology rolled off her tongue with practiced precision, suggesting extensive research or coaching. "The doctors say it's aggressive, but treatable if we act quickly." The words hit me like a physical assault. Brain tumor. My vibrant, intelligent daughter, reduced to a medical diagnosis that sounded like a death sentence. Emma continued her explanation through carefully timed sobs, describing symptoms I now realized she'd been fabricating for weeks. The persistent headaches, occasional dizziness, moments of confusion that I'd attributed to work stress from her job at a downtown marketing firm. Everything suddenly made horrifying sense, or so I believed at the time. Dr. Patterson at Seattle General is one of the best neurosurgeons in the Pacific Northwest, Emma continued, pulling tissues from her purse with shaking hands. "He wants to schedule surgery immediately, followed by an aggressive chemotherapy regimen. The treatment plan is intensive, but he's confident about my chances if we start right away." I spent that entire night researching glioblastoma multiforme, reading medical journals and survival statistics that painted a terrifying picture of what my daughter was facing. The prognosis was indeed serious, with 5-year survival rates that varied dramatically based on treatment speed and tumor characteristics. Emma's claimed diagnosis fell into a category where immediate intervention could mean the difference between life and death. Every article reinforced the urgency she'd communicated, and I found myself grateful that she'd caught the disease early enough for treatment. My research also revealed the staggering costs associated with advanced brain cancer treatment. Even with good insurance, Out-of-pocket expenses could easily reach hundreds of thousands of dollars for experimental treatments, specialized medications, and extended hospital stays. The next morning, Emma returned with a thick folder of medical documents that appeared to detail her diagnosis and recommended treatment protocol. The paperwork looked legitimate, complete with hospital letterheads, doctor signatures, and medical terminology that matched everything I'd read during my sleepless night of research. Dr. Patterson's treatment plan outlined a surgical procedure scheduled for the following month, followed by 6 months of intensive chemotherapy and radiation therapy. The total estimated cost, after insurance coverage, was $200,000 in out-of-pocket expenses. Emma spread the documents across my kitchen table with the same desperate efficiency she'd shown during college financial aid applications. "Dad, I know this is a lot to ask," she said, her voice carrying the hollow tone of someone who'd exhausted all other options. "My insurance will cover most of the basic treatment, but Dr. Patterson recommends a combination approach that includes experimental drugs and specialized procedures. The survival rates are significantly higher, but these advanced treatments aren't fully covered. I've applied for medical loans, but they're either denied or come with interest rates that would bankrupt me even if I survive." The folder contained pre-approval letters from several lenders, all declining her loan applications based on her income and existing debt levels. The financial request was staggering, representing nearly everything I'd saved for retirement after 30 years of building and managing rental properties. But what choice did I have? This was my daughter's life, and money seemed irrelevant compared to giving her the best possible chance of survival. I'd worked construction jobs in Alaska during brutal winters, saved every possible dollar, and built a modest real estate portfolio specifically to ensure financial security for both Emma and myself. If that security could save her life, the choice seemed obvious. "We'll figure out the money, sweetheart. Your health is the only thing that matters right now." Emma's relief was immediate and overwhelming. She threw herself into my arms, sobbing, with what I interpreted as gratitude mixed with terror about the ordeal ahead. "Thank you, Dad. I promise I'll pay you back once I'm healthy again. I know this isn't how you plan to use your retirement savings, but I'll make it up to you somehow." The moment felt sacred, like a father's ultimate expression of love through financial sacrifice. I held her while she cried, stroking her hair and making promises about how we'd get through this together. The emotional intensity was so genuine that even now, knowing the truth, I struggle to believe it was entirely fabricated. The mortgage application process began immediately, with Emma accompanying me to First National Bank to meet with loan officer Patricia Chen, who'd handled my business financing for 15 years. Refinancing my paid-off house to access $200,000 in equity required extensive documentation, credit verification, and property appraisal. But my established relationship with the bank expedited the normally lengthy process. Patricia expressed sympathy about Emma's diagnosis and assured us that the loan could be finalized within 2 weeks. Emma sat beside me during the meeting, occasionally dabbing her eyes with tissues and asking thoughtful questions about repayment terms that demonstrated her concern about burdening my finances. During the waiting period for loan approval, Emma provided regular updates about her medical appointments and treatment preparations. She showed me appointment confirmation letters, prescription bottles for anti-nausea medications, and dietary restriction guidelines that Dr. Patterson had supposedly provided to optimize her condition before surgery. The attention to detail was remarkable, with every piece of documentation supporting the elaborate fiction she'd constructed. She even modified her eating habits, claiming that certain foods triggered headaches that were becoming more frequent and severe as the tumor grew. The most convincing element of her deception was the gradual deterioration in her physical appearance and energy levels. Over the course of several weeks, Emma lost noticeable weight, developed dark circles under her eyes, and began displaying the fatigue and occasional confusion that matched symptoms I'd read about in medical literature. Her performance was so consistent and believable that even my natural skepticism was completely overwhelmed by paternal concern. When she occasionally stumbled while walking or paused mid-sentence as if forgetting her thoughts, my heart broke for what she was enduring. Emma's supposed employer was remarkably accommodating about her medical situation, allowing flexible work arrangements and extended leave for treatment appointments. She showed me correspondence with her supervisor detailing how her medical condition would be handled under the company's disability policies. The letters appeared legitimate, complete with corporate letterheads and human resources language that matched what I'd expect from a professional organization dealing with a serious employee health crisis. Every aspect of her normal life seemed to be adjusting around the cancer diagnosis in ways that reinforced the story's authenticity. The $200,000 loan approval came through exactly 2 weeks after our bank meeting, with funds available for immediate transfer to cover Emma's medical expenses. The wire transfer instructions Emma provided directed the money to what appeared to be Seattle General Hospital's billing department, complete with account numbers and routing information that matched the hospital's official financial systems. I executed the transfer on a Wednesday morning, watching $200,000 disappear from my account, with the grim satisfaction of a father doing everything possible to save his daughter's life. Emma's reaction to the successful money transfer was subdued rather than celebratory, which seemed appropriate given the circumstances. She thanked me quietly, expressing relief that Dr. Patterson could now proceed with the optimal treatment protocol without any delays caused by insurance complications or financial constraints. The surgery was scheduled for the following Monday, with preoperative appointments scheduled throughout the weekend to ensure her readiness for the complex neurosurgical procedure. I offered to accompany her to these appointments, but she insisted that the emotional stress of having family present would interfere with her mental preparation for surgery. That weekend, Emma's behavior shifted in subtle ways that I attributed to pre-surgical anxiety. She seemed distracted and frequently checked her phone, claiming to monitor messages from Dr. Patterson's office about last-minute preparation requirements. Her appetite disappeared completely, and she complained of worsening headaches that required stronger pain medications. The deterioration was heartbreaking to witness, but also seemed consistent with someone facing major surgery for a life-threatening condition. I spent the weekend researching post-surgical recovery procedures and arranging my schedule to provide whatever support she'd need during the lengthy treatment process. Monday morning arrived with typical Seattle rain, creating an appropriately somber atmosphere for what I believed would be the most critical day of Emma's life. She left her apartment early to begin preoperative procedures at Seattle General Hospital, promising to call me once she was settled in her hospital room. The surgery was expected to last 6 to 8 hours, with Dr. Patterson planning to remove as much of the tumor as possible while preserving critical brain functions. Emma had prepared me for the possibility that she might experience temporary cognitive or physical impairments while recovering from such an invasive procedure. The first warning sign came at 2 p.m. when I called Seattle General Hospital's main number to check on Emma's surgical status. The operator, after checking multiple databases, informed me that no patient named Emma Richardson was registered for surgery that day, nor was she listed as a current patient in any department. When I insisted that she was having brain surgery performed by Dr. Patterson, the operator transferred me to the neurosurgery department, where a nurse confirmed that Dr. Patterson was indeed on staff, but wasn't performing any surgeries that day and had no patient records for Emma Richardson. The confusion initially seemed like a simple administrative error, possibly involving insurance name discrepancies or privacy restrictions on patient information. Hospitals were notorious for bureaucratic complications that could prevent family members from accessing information about their loved ones. I drove to Seattle General Hospital determined to resolve the confusion and locate Emma, who might be frightened and wondering why her father hadn't visited during her recovery period. The hospital's main lobby was bustling with typical activity, and the information desk staff seemed competent and professional as they attempted to help me locate my daughter. After 30 minutes of searching through patient databases, consulting with multiple departments, and verifying information with supervisors, the hospital's patient advocate confirmed what the phone operator had indicated. Emma Richardson had never been a patient at Seattle General Hospital. No records existed of any appointments with Dr. Patterson. No surgical procedures had been scheduled, and no billing arrangements had been made for the $200,000 treatment protocol she'd described. The patient advocate suggested that perhaps Emma was being treated at a different hospital and offered to contact other Seattle area medical facilities to help locate her. The systematic search of every major hospital in the Seattle metropolitan area consumed the rest of the afternoon and produced identical results. Emma Richardson was not a patient at any medical facility, had not undergone brain surgery, and was not receiving cancer treatment anywhere in the region. The impossibility of the situation was overwhelming, forcing me to confront possibilities that my paternal instincts refused to consider. Either Emma was receiving treatment under a different name at a facility I hadn't contacted, or the entire cancer diagnosis was fabricated. Neither explanation made sense given the extensive documentation and months of consistent symptoms she'd displayed. Driving home from the last hospital on my list, I tried calling Emma's cell phone every 5 minutes, desperate for an explanation that would resolve the growing horror in my mind. Each call went directly to voicemail, with her recorded message cheerfully instructing callers to leave detailed messages that would be returned promptly. The normalcy of her voicemail greeting contrasted grotesquely with the cancer patient persona she'd maintained for months, suggesting a level of deception that my mind struggled to process. If Emma had fabricated her illness, the implications extended far beyond simple lies into criminal fraud territory. That evening, I spread Emma's medical documents across my kitchen table and began examining them with the detailed attention I'd once applied to construction blueprints and property contracts. Under careful scrutiny, inconsistencies became apparent. The hospital letterheads were slightly incorrect, with color variations and logo proportions that differed from Seattle General's official documents. Doctor signatures didn't match handwriting samples I found on legitimate hospital correspondence. Medical terminology, while impressive, contained subtle errors that suggested research rather than professional usage. The elaborate fraud had been constructed with remarkable attention to detail, but wasn't perfect enough to withstand forensic examination. The most devastating discovery was the bank routing information Emma had provided for the $200,000 wire transfer. Instead of directing the money to Seattle General Hospital's billing department, the funds had been transferred to a personal account registered to Emma Richardson at a different bank. The account had been opened 6 months earlier, exactly coinciding with when her supposed symptoms had first appeared. Bank records showed that the money had been immediately transferred to various gambling websites and cryptocurrency exchanges, confirming that my daughter had stolen my retirement savings to fund an addiction that had apparently been consuming her life for months. Sleep was impossible that night as I processed the magnitude of Emma's betrayal and the implications for both our futures. She had systematically planned and executed a fraud that exploited every aspect of my love for her, using my deepest fears about losing another family member to manipulate me into financial ruin. The performance had been flawless, involving months of consistent deception, fabricated medical documentation, and physical symptoms that had convinced me she was dying. The level of calculation required for such elaborate fraud suggested a person I didn't recognize, someone capable of destroying her father's future without apparent conscience or remorse. Tuesday morning brought no communication from Emma, despite my repeated attempts to reach her through phone calls, text messages, and emails that demanded explanation for her disappearance and the missing money. Her silence confirmed what the evidence had already revealed, but I needed to confront her directly before involving law enforcement in what was clearly criminal fraud. The personal violation felt more devastating than the financial loss, representing the complete destruction of everything I'd believed about my relationship with my daughter. She had weaponized my love against me with surgical precision, transforming parental devotion into financial exploitation. I decided to conduct my own investigation before contacting police, partly to gather additional evidence and partly because I needed to understand how extensively Emma had deceived me. The first step was visiting her apartment building in Capitol Hill, where I'd never actually been inside her unit despite helping her move there 2 years earlier. Using the spare key she'd given me for emergencies, I entered her apartment expecting to find evidence of either genuine illness or gambling addiction that might explain her desperate behavior. The apartment revealed the truth with brutal clarity. Emma's bedroom contained multiple computers displaying active gambling websites, cryptocurrency trading platforms, and online poker rooms where she'd apparently been spending most of her time. Financial documents scattered across her desk showed catastrophic losses totaling over $300,000 during the past year, far exceeding even the $200,000 she'd stolen from me. Credit card statements revealed cash advances and borrowing that had exhausted her available credit, while loan rejection letters confirmed that legitimate financial institutions had refused to enable her continued gambling. The most disturbing discovery was a notebook containing detailed plans for the fake cancer scheme, complete with research about glioblastoma symptoms, hospital procedures, and medical terminology that would be convincing to a concerned parent. Emma had scripted conversations, practiced emotional responses, and planned every aspect of the deception with the methodical approach of someone executing a complex business fraud. Pages of notes detailed my psychological weaknesses, financial resources, and emotional triggers that could be exploited to maximize the money she could extract before the scheme collapsed. Hidden in her closet, I found the props she'd used to create the illusion of cancer treatment: fake prescription bottles, makeup designed to create the appearance of illness, and even a hospital gown that she'd apparently worn to make her deception more convincing. The elaborate costume collection revealed the theatrical nature of her months-long performance, transforming my dying daughter into a carefully constructed character designed to manipulate my fears and love. The attention to detail was both impressive and horrifying, demonstrating intelligence and creativity that she'd channeled into destroying the person who loved her most. Emma's computer browsing history revealed extensive research into medical fraud schemes, inheritance manipulation tactics, and legal strategies for avoiding prosecution when family members discover financial deception. She'd studied other cases involving fake illness scams, learning from both successful frauds and those that had resulted in criminal charges. The level of premeditation was staggering, suggesting that she'd been planning this deception for months before implementing the first stage of her scheme. My daughter had become a student of fraud, specializing in exploiting parental love for financial gain. Phone records showed extensive communication with other gamblers and online fraud communities, where she'd apparently sought advice about executing family-based financial scams. Text message conversations revealed that she'd bragged about her success in convincing me to refinance my house, describing me as an easy mark who could be manipulated through emotional appeals about her health and safety. Reading these messages was more painful than discovering the financial theft, revealing how my daughter truly viewed our relationship and my value as anything beyond a source of money for her addiction. The gambling losses were staggering in their scope and recklessness. Emma had been betting thousands of dollars on single poker hands, day trading cryptocurrency with money she'd borrowed against her future ability to repay, and participating in high-stakes online games that required buy-ins exceeding her annual salary. The pattern suggested someone completely consumed by addiction, making increasingly desperate financial decisions as losses mounted and legitimate funding sources disappeared. The fake cancer scheme had been her final attempt to access money that could either pay off debts or fund one last attempt to gamble her way back to solvency. Armed with overwhelming evidence of Emma's fraud, I finally contacted Seattle Police Department's Fraud Division to report the crime and begin the process of seeking justice for her theft of my retirement savings. Detective Maria Santos listened patiently as I explained the elaborate deception, occasionally asking questions that revealed her familiarity with similar cases involving family members who exploit emotional relationships for financial gain. The level of planning and deception Emma had employed elevated her crime beyond simple theft into sophisticated fraud territory that could result in serious prison time if prosecuted successfully. Detective Santos explained that elder financial abuse cases were becoming increasingly common, often involving adult children who used medical emergencies, investment opportunities, or other emotional appeals to extract money from parents who trusted them completely. Emma's fake cancer scheme was more elaborate than most, but followed patterns that law enforcement had seen repeatedly in cases involving gambling addiction and family exploitation. The detective assured me that the evidence I'd gathered would likely support successful prosecution, though recovery of the stolen money would be difficult given that most of it had been lost through online gambling. The criminal investigation that followed was thorough and ultimately successful in building a case against Emma that included fraud, theft, money laundering, and elder abuse charges. Bank records, computer forensics, and the physical evidence I discovered in her apartment created an overwhelming case that clearly demonstrated both her guilt and the premeditated nature of her crimes. The fake medical documents were analyzed by forensic experts who confirmed they were sophisticated forgeries designed to appear legitimate to anyone without specialized knowledge of hospital administrative procedures. Emma was arrested 3 days later at a casino in Reno, Nevada, where she'd apparently fled after realizing that her deception had been discovered. She was found at a high-stakes poker table with $43,000 in cash, the last remnant of the money she'd stolen from me. Her arrest made local news as an example of the elaborate lengths that gambling addicts would go to fund their destructive behavior, including betraying family members who had trusted and supported them throughout their lives. The media attention was humiliating, but also served to warn other parents about the sophisticated fraud techniques that criminals were using to exploit familial relationships. The court proceedings were emotionally devastating, forcing me to testify about the details of Emma's deception and its impact on my life and financial security. Watching my daughter in handcuffs and prison clothing was heartbreaking, but I couldn't allow my emotional connection to prevent her from facing consequences for crimes that had destroyed my retirement and violated my trust in the most fundamental way possible. Emma's defense attorney attempted to portray her as a victim of gambling addiction who needed treatment rather than punishment. But the premeditated nature of her fraud scheme undermined arguments about impaired judgment or temporary mental incapacity. Emma was ultimately sentenced to 6 years in federal prison for fraud and elder abuse, with restitution ordered for the full $200,000 she'd stolen, though the likelihood of recovering that money was minimal given her financial situation. The judge's comments during sentencing emphasized the particularly cruel nature of crimes that exploited family relationships and the trust that parents naturally placed in their adult children. Emma's betrayal was characterized as especially heinous because it weaponized parental love against the victim, creating emotional trauma that extended far beyond the financial losses. The mortgage on my house remained a crushing financial burden that forced me to sell the property and move into a small apartment, eliminating the equity I'd spent 30 years building. The retirement I'd planned was no longer possible, requiring me to return to construction work at age 64 to generate enough income to cover basic living expenses and the loan payments Emma's fraud had created. The physical demands of construction work at my age were challenging, but the financial reality left me no alternative options for maintaining solvency. Emma attempted to contact me several times during her incarceration, sending letters that alternated between apologies and justifications for her behavior. The letters claimed that gambling addiction had impaired her judgment and that she genuinely intended to pay me back once she'd won enough money to cover both her debts and the money she'd stolen. Reading these messages was painful because they demonstrated that even while facing the consequences of her crimes, Emma still didn't fully understand or accept responsibility for the calculated nature of her deception and the permanent damage it had caused to our relationship. I never responded to Emma's letters or visited her during her imprisonment, recognizing that maintaining contact would prevent me from healing from the trauma of her betrayal. Some relationships cannot survive certain types of violations, and Emma's systematic exploitation of my love and trust had created damage that I couldn't repair or forgive. The daughter I'd raised and cherished had been replaced by someone capable of such calculated cruelty that continued contact would only perpetuate my emotional suffering without serving any constructive purpose. 3 years after Emma's sentencing, I received notification that she'd been released from federal prison after serving 4 years of her 6-year sentence for good behavior. The news triggered anxiety about potential contact attempts and concern about what she might do next, given her history of manipulative behavior and apparent lack of genuine remorse for her crimes. I'd changed my phone number, moved to a different city, and taken precautions to prevent her from locating me. But the possibility of future contact remained a source of ongoing stress. The experience fundamentally changed my approach to relationships and trust, making me more cautious about emotional manipulation tactics and more aware of how addiction could transform people into versions of themselves capable of unconscionable behavior. Emma's betrayal had taught me that family relationships didn't provide immunity from exploitation, and that even the strongest parental love could be weaponized by someone desperate enough to prioritize their own needs above all ethical considerations. The lesson was valuable, but came at a cost that affected every aspect of my remaining years. 5 years later, I still work construction jobs to cover living expenses and the mortgage payments that Emma's fraud created, though my physical capabilities are declining with age and the demands of manual labor. The retirement I'd spent decades planning was sacrificed to fund my daughter's gambling addiction, leaving me with minimal savings and uncertain financial security for my remaining years. The impact extends beyond money into the realm of emotional devastation that affects my ability to trust others or form meaningful relationships with people who might genuinely care about my welfare. Emma's case became part of law enforcement training materials about sophisticated family fraud schemes and the warning signs that parents should recognize when adult children suddenly develop expensive medical or financial emergencies. My willingness to speak publicly about the experience helped other families recognize similar manipulation tactics and avoid becoming victims of elaborate deceptions designed to exploit parental love. Converting my painful experience into educational resources provided some sense of purpose and meaning that partially offset the trauma of discovering that my daughter had viewed me as nothing more than a source of money for her destructive addiction. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.